President Costa, such a great pleasure to have the chance to speak with you. I know it has been a very busy week, but I would like to focus on whether the positive movement that we saw at the NATO summit is making you more confident that we might get a trade deal with the United States.
Well, the main issue between Europe and the United States was precisely the European defense, and it's solved. In the NATO summit, the European countries, Canada, United States, Turkey, achieved an agreement on how to increase the investment on defense. And as President Trump said, is a big win because effectively we rebalance the burden sharing on European defense. Then I think we solved the main issue from the American point of view. And we, as you remember, on March 2022, we decided to assume greater responsibility in our own defense. And during a lot of time, the people believe that this greater responsibility from Europe, this European pillar of NATO, is something dangerous because it's divisive to United States. But now it's clear that United States have new priorities, namely in Pacific. And then the best way to strengthen our relationship, our alliance, is precisely to do what we have decided, is to strengthen our position and to assume greater responsibilities in our own defense. Then I think we solved already the main issue. And then it's, I think, the pave is passed to solve the other issues.
So you're hoping that now that you've said we are going to spend more on defense, you can also agree with Donald Trump on a trade deal?
Well, we have decided in NATO to spend much, and yesterday in the European Union we have decided and organized to spend better. Now we have trade. And of course, on trade, we need to, as soon as possible, to give certainty for our economy. We are talking about a trade relation that represents 30% of the global trade, 40% of the global GDP. Then it's essential to stabilize the economic expectations in the both sides of the Atlantic to achieve an agreement. As you know, for us, it's very clear. Any tariff is a bad solution because tariffs means taxes for the consumers, doesn't improve the exportations, and if we should avoid taxes, better, and that means avoid tariffs. Then we don't like tariffs, and we are working to have the best possible agreement with the U.S.
Do you think it can happen before July 9th?
We work harder in this sense, both United States and the European Commission. Yesterday, United States came with a new proposal that is assessed by the European Commission. But most important is both parties are very engaged to find a solution. And I hope that it will, and that we achieve this before the 9th of July.
Let's see how these conversations will unfold. I would also like to get your thoughts because you chair the European Summit meetings. And the European leaders yesterday were also making the point, at least the Germans were suggesting we need an agreement as soon as possible. The French seem to be a little bit more of the line of the opinion that we need a good deal, not necessarily a quick one. How was the discussion last night in terms of the balance across the 27?
Well, as you know, who led these negotiations is the European Commission.
Right.
The European Commission, of course, listen the different member states, but we don't discuss these negotiations on the detail because, of course, this is under the responsibility of the European Commission, and we have full confidence on the European Commission to lead these negotiations. But for sure, any agreement is better than a conflict. zero tariffs is better than any tariffs, and we need to give certainty for the global economy. If you look for the figures, and if you look for the recently forecasts from the different international institutions, namely the IMF, it's very clear that all this debate on tariffs, all this uncertainty on the economic environment is undermining the confidence, and now the forecast is drawn toward the provisions of the economic growth, both and especially in the United States. Then it's not a good debate, it's not a good issue, and we need to solve this as soon as possible.
I will conclude the conversation around trade in a moment, but I would also like to get your thoughts, and you have so much experience in international politics, on the proposal from Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission, suggesting an alternative to the WTO. What did you make of her comment that perhaps the European Union should look at extending its partnership with Asian countries?
Unfortunately, the WTO now is blocked. But it's very important to have a common framework to give confidence on global trade. And we are not talking about to replace WTO. We are not talking about an alternative to WTO. What we are talking is the possible agreement between two very important economic blocs, the CTPP and European Union. Altogether, we are talking about 1 billion of consumers. It's a huge market. And if we achieve to, on behalf of the same rules, the WTO, to have an agreement that we can give confidence to increase trade relations, these have a huge economic impact. And this is also very important from the political point of view and from the geoeconomic point of view, because it is a clear message. Then these two great economic blocs believe in free trade. We believe in the international trade, in the global economy, and we are keen to work together to protect the free trade.
Very clear. Given how busy this week has been, I would also like to get your thoughts on the approach shown by European leaders towards President Donald Trump. One of the comments I heard at the summit yesterday from some European capitals were that they were not happy by the words daddy and the general flattering of Donald Trump. What did you make of that approach? Because I also noticed that you gave a T-shirt signed by Ronaldo to President Trump. Is that the only way to deal with President Trump?
Look, what is normal in international life is to have polite relations among the leaders. Even we don't share the same point of views, even when we have different positions, even when we disagree on the different issues, what is correct is to have polite relations and try to engage. And of course, when we are talking about the president of an ally, a president of a country is a friendly country, a partner, an ally, a closest country where we have a close relationship. Of course, we need to engage with President Trump. Of course, each one have their own style to engage with him. And the T-shirt signed by Cristiano Ronaldo to President Trump has a very good message. He said, playing for peace. And this what we want is to share with, to be part of the same team of President Trump to promote peace in the world. Peace in Ukraine, peace in the Middle East, peace in everywhere. Because we need to turn this page of the conflicts. We need to stop Russian aggression to Ukraine, Russian invasion to Ukraine. We need to achieve a just and lasting peace in Ukraine. We need to stop the war in the Middle East and stop and to urge Israel to a ceasefire, not only with Iran, but also in Gaza, and to assure and to give an answer for this humanitarian tragedy in Gaza. Then my message to President Trump is, look, playing for peace, playing together, be part of this work as a team for peace in the world.
I will focus to Middle East and Ukraine in just a second, but I just would like to understand whether you still think the United States is actually your biggest ally.
From the geographic point of view, yes. From demographic point of view, yes. From financial point of view, yes. And even from politically, of course, is our major ally.
Just wanted to get that clarification because obviously there's been several back and forth with the United States on tariffs and so on. Let's focus on Ukraine.
But look, this is very important. Even between friends, sometimes problems rise. And when problems rise, what we should do is to address these problems, is what we are doing. And we understand that at least since President Obama, United States shifts their geostrategic priority to the Pacific. And that means that we need to assume greater responsibility. And we have understood this, at least in March 2022, the European countries decided to assume greater responsibility. United States said, okay, we have a problem on trade, because we have a deficit in our trade relations with you. That's true in goods, is not true in service, but in the balance, effectively, they are an advantage to Europe. Okay, we can address this issue. I don't believe that tariffs is the best way to address this issue, and certainly this agreement in NATO will solve a large part of this problem, because to spend 5% on defense, that means at least one part which will be used to buy American. And of course, if we buy more American, that means then the trade relations rebalance. Then that's the reason, because I have said always that we cannot separate these two negotiations. About defense, it was the most important issue for the United States, and it is already solved, and the trade, because both are interlinked. Because on the other hand, if you undermine the economic strength of Europe, you are creating problems to deliver what the European member states have agreed in the NATO summit. And we need to have strong economy to support this increasing on defense spending.
The reason why I was asking is because obviously, President Obama didn't share publicly messages that he had received from other leaders and so on. But we don't have too much time left, so I would like to focus on Ukraine as well for a moment. Is the EU has the EU lost its unity when it comes to Ukraine? Because now every time we're coming to a summit, there's an agreement on Ukraine that only includes 26 countries.
Now, we remain united in the main goal, a just and lasting peace in Ukraine. One out of 27 have a different vision of how to reach this goal. And we should respect this difference. But look, when we have a decision at 26 with only one country not reaching the same position, we cannot talk about a division. What we can say is this is one country was isolated.
It's not a union, though. It's not a union.
No, it's a union where one country has a different position, isolated in the union.
So far, you've managed to circumvent Hungary on some items. But when it comes to the 18th package of sanctions, for instance, you're going to need their support.
Well, until now, we have approved 17 package of sanctions. Yesterday, we endorsed the rollover of this package. And as I know, Hungary is nothing against the 18 package. And we are working this in the 18 package in close coordination with Canada, with United States, and with other like-minded partners, because to to be effective and to work effectively this package of sanctions, we need, of course, to coordinate at a global way.
So can we expect that 18th package of sanctions to be actually weaker than what the Commission initially suggested, so you get Hungary totally on board?
I don't have any sign that Hungary is not on board about the 18th package.
Let's see what they will say, because the Prime Minister this morning had already some comments that if there's any sort of measures that involve energy, he's not going to approve the package. I would also like to focus on the Middle East. For the time being, it seems that the EU is falling short of actually announcing measures against Israel. I'm wondering why.
We must understand that we are a union on diversity. We have 27 member states with different histories, different cultures, different geographic point of views to look at the world, and with their own national external policy. And what is very impressive is our capacity, in despite of all of this diversity, to reach a common position. Sometimes it's about certain issues or certain countries is more difficult. And if you come back 1 year ago, it was completely impossible to have a common position on Israel. And now we have. And this is a good sign for the Union, but this is a very bad sign for the world. Because what happened along the last year is we start to have a common position, very strong, supporting Israel after the terrorist attacks from Hamas the 7th of October. And we support Israel, and we recognize to Israel the right to self-defense, even out of their territory. The last month, effectively, it's impossible to understand what is happening in Gaza. It's impossible to don't see and understand what is happening in Gaza and don't see and don't react to this humanitarian tragedy. And then there are a full agreement among the 27 that from the humanitarian point of view is unacceptable what's happening in Gaza. And that's why the 27, it's why the 27 tasked the High Representative to present a review based on our association agreement if Israel is respecting or not the human rights. And for the first time, we have an official statement from the European Union saying Israel does not respecting human rights in Gaza. And yesterday we tasked the Minister of Foreign Affairs to decide on the next steps. And in the meantime, of course, we will engage in dialogue with Israel, because our goal is not sanction Israel. Our goal is to solve the problem on the ground, is to protect lives on the ground, especially the dramatic situation of children in Gaza. And I hope that before the Minister of Foreign Affairs Council, Israel decided to respect the full ceasefire in Gaza to allow the humanitarian aid to enter in Gaza, to deliver effectively to the Gazian people the humanitarian aid. And this is the most important, the most urgent, and I hope that it is solved before the next Council of Ministers of Foreign Affairs.